You've always felt everything: the laughter, the tears, the invisible threads of emotion connecting you to the world. You gave your heart freely without hesitation because you believed in the beauty of connection. You believed that love, compassion, and understanding were not just virtues, but your purpose. Yet somehow, time and again, that trust was met with betrayal, neglect, or indifference. And now you feel a shift inside. You realize there comes a moment when giving endlessly does not equate to wisdom, when pouring from an empty cup only leaves you hollow. The empath, who once opened their soul without pause, begins to understand the sacredness of self-preservation. This is not a punishment for your kindness. No, it is a divine invitation to awaken to a higher form of love, one that starts within. You begin to notice the patterns, the recurring moments of pain, the cycles of being hurt, the subtle erosion of your spirit. And with that clarity comes choice. You start to step back, to pause, to observe. Not everyone deserves your vulnerability. Not every heart is ready to receive the depth of your light. And in this recognition, you reclaim your power. Boundaries, once foreign, once feared, become your allies. You understand now that saying no is not rejection, but protection. Saying enough is not bitterness, but wisdom. You are learning that it is sacred to honor your emotions, to defend your peace, and to nurture your soul. You are learning that your empathy is a gift, but gifts are not meant to be stolen, drained, or exploited. This transformation does not come from hate or resentment. It comes from reflection, from sitting quietly with your heart and understanding what serves your highest good. It comes from choosing your peace over pain, your growth over grief, your spirit over surrender. In every heartbreak, in every disappointment, there is a lesson, a divine principle whispering, rise, protect, transform. And in this rising, you begin to redefine what love truly is. You see that love does not demand sacrifice of self. Love does not require that you vanish into someone else's darkness. Love is balance. Love is honor. Love is a space where hearts meet freely, where souls are nourished, and where connection is mutual. Becoming avoidant is not a betrayal of your former self. It is the natural evolution of a soul that has endured too much to remain vulnerable to the wrong energy. It is strength. It is wisdom. It is the divine alignment of your heart with your soul's higher purpose. You are no longer just the giver. You are the guardian of your own light. And now, when the world tests you, when relationships demand more than they deserve, you stand firm, you observe, you protect, you choose. You have become the shielded empath, the awakened spirit, the one who understands that true power is not in endless giving, but in giving with discernment, love with wisdom, and living with peace. Rise, for your journey has transformed pain into purpose, heartbreak into clarity, and hurt into the ultimate form of empowerment. You are no longer merely surviving. You are consciously thriving. The empath has awakened. And now the world will learn to meet you where your light truly belongs. The journey of an empath is a journey of an empath, is a journey of profound depth, of feeling the world in ways most people cannot. Empaths are wired to absorb the emotions of others, to sense the unspoken pain, joy, and tension around them. They are naturally drawn to helping, to healing, to giving. Every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, every silent presence beside someone in need feels like an extension of their soul. For an empath, compassion is not optional. It is woven into their very being. Yet, in this relentless giving, there lies a hidden danger, the breaking point. There comes a moment when the empath's heart, stretched and tested over and over again, begins to crack under the weight of repeated hurt. It starts subtly, often unnoticed. The first time someone takes advantage of their kindness, dismisses their feelings, or betrays their trust, the empath might brush it off, thinking, I can forgive, I can understand, people make mistakes. But mistakes accumulate. Each instance chips away at their inner reserve. Each disappointment, each disregard for their emotions acts like a tiny fracture in the foundation of their trust. Because empaths feel everything so deeply, the pain of betrayal is not a fleeting moment. It lingers, echoing through their mind and heart, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, reshapes the way they relate to the world. The breaking point is not a single event, but a series of awakenings, a gradual recognition that their limitless compassion is being met with disregard. They realize that no matter how much they give, no matter how much they pour themselves into others, some people will never see their value. Some will drain them, exploit them, or abandon them without thought. And in this realization, the empath faces a critical choice: continue giving blindly or protect the sacredness of their own heart. This breaking point is painful because it confronts them with a paradox. The very gift that defines them, their empathy, has also made them vulnerable to harm. For a long time, they believed that love and understanding could heal anyone, that patience and kindness could bridge every gap. But life, with its harsh lessons, shows them that not everyone is capable of receiving love in the same way it is given. Some people are not ready, willing, or able to honor the depth of an empath's heart. The empath must then reconcile their desire to help with the reality that their giving has limits, and those limits must be respected, first by themselves. At this stage, the empath begins to see the wisdom in boundaries, though it may feel foreign or even uncomfortable. They recognize that compassion without discernment is not strength. It is self-sacrifice at the cost of their own well-being. The breaking point teaches them that their energy is sacred, that their heart is precious, and that protecting themselves is not selfish, but necessary. They start to understand that empathy is not about endless giving to anyone who demands it. It is about offering care consciously, thoughtfully, and selectively, ensuring that it nourishes rather than depletes. This awakening is transformative. It may come with feelings of anger, sadness, or even guilt, but these are temporary ripples compared to the long-term growth that follows. The empath learns that to continue being truly compassionate, they must first honor themselves. They must recognize when a relationship, no matter how familiar or dear, becomes a source of repeated pain rather than mutual respect and growth. And in this recognition, the breaking point is not the end of their empathy. It is the beginning of a higher, wiser form of it. Through this journey, the empath discovers an essential truth. Compassion is not diminished by protection, and love is not weakened by discernment. The breaking point teaches that being deeply connected to others does not require sacrificing one's own soul. It is here, in this painful yet enlightening threshold, that the empath starts to evolve, to shift from giving endlessly to giving wisely, from loving unconditionally to loving consciously. They learn that the heart, while resilient, must also be guarded, and that true strength lies in balancing generosity with self-respect, openness with boundaries, and care with wisdom. This is the sacred lesson of the breaking point. It is not a failure of the heart, but a triumph of self-awareness. It signals the moment when the empath realizes that their most profound power is not in how much they can give to others, but in how fiercely and wisely they can protect their own soul while continuing to shine their light in the world. It is the awakening that transforms hurt into wisdom, vulnerability into discernment, and endless giving, into enlightened generosity. The journey from openness to guardedness is a subtle but profound shift in the life of an empath. In the beginning, empaths live in a state of boundless vulnerability, wearing their hearts on their sleeves, feeling deeply and trusting fully. They approach the world with a belief in the goodness of people, assuming that kindness will be met with kindness, and that their willingness to give emotionally will create reciprocity. This openness is beautiful, but it comes with a hidden risk. Every relationship, every interaction carries the potential for hurt. And over time, repeated experiences of betrayal, misunderstanding, or emotional exploitation begin to create an invisible barrier within the empath's heart. This shift is not sudden. It is a gradual process that begins with small, almost imperceptible adjustments in behavior and perception. At first, the empath might notice a quiet hesitation before sharing their deepest thoughts or feelings. They may start questioning whether their generosity is being truly appreciated, or if it is being taken for granted. The innate desire to help and to nurture does not disappear, but it becomes tempered with discernment. They start asking themselves, who is truly worthy of my energy? Who honors my heart? This inner questioning marks the beginning of the transition from an open-hearted giver to a carefully protective presence. The transformation is both psychological and emotional. Empaths begin to learn the language of self-preservation. They notice patterns of toxicity, recurring disappointments, and relationships where their efforts are never fully acknowledged. They begin to sense when interactions will drain them rather than uplift them. With this awareness, they start to practice subtle boundaries. A pause before offering support, a moment of reflection before sharing intimate feelings, a careful observation of others' intentions. This is not coldness, it is wisdom born from repeated emotional lessons. It is the natural response of a soul that has been deeply tested and has learned the necessity of protecting its own energy. Guardedness does not mean the empath stops feeling or stops loving. Rather, it signals a higher level of emotional intelligence. They recognize that true connection cannot thrive where one person gives endlessly while the other takes without reciprocation. They begin to prioritize relationships that offer mutual respect, genuine care, and shared responsibility. This selectivity is a form of self-respect, a declaration that their heart is not an unlimited resource to be exploited, but a sacred vessel to be honored. The shift also carries an internal struggle. Empaths often wrestle with feelings of guilt, fearing that guarding themselves makes them selfish or unkind. They may remember a time when their openness brought joy to others and wonder if closing off diminishes their essence. But gradually, they understand that boundaries do not diminish their empathy. They enhance it. By protecting themselves from repeated emotional harm, they preserve the capacity to love and care more sustainably. Guardedness becomes a tool for longevity, a way to continue giving without losing oneself in the process. This transformation is accompanied by clarity. The empath begins to recognize which relationships are nourishing and which are draining, which environments are safe and which are harmful. They develop an intuition, not just for other people's emotions, but also for the energy dynamics in their surroundings. They learn to step back from situations where their heart is at risk, to disengage from patterns that no longer serve their growth, and to invest their energy where it can flourish. This conscious discernment is the hallmark of a mature, awakened empath. In essence, the shift from openness to guardedness is a sacred evolution. It is not a betrayal of the empath's nature, but a refinement of it. By learning when to give freely and when to hold back, empaths discover the power of balance. They understand that vulnerability is a gift, but wisdom lies in knowing when, where, and with whom to be vulnerable. This transformation allows them to continue experiencing the depth of life without being consumed by it. Through this journey, the empath becomes not less compassionate, but more empowered. They maintain their light and their sensitivity while learning the art of self-preservation. Guardedness is no longer a reaction born of fear. It is a conscious, deliberate choice to protect their heart while remaining open to true, reciprocal connections. It marks the beginning of a new chapter, one where the empath's energy is respected, their boundaries are honored, and their soul is free to love wisely, deeply, and sustainably. The journey of an empath is often filled with deep connection, profound sensitivity, and an almost instinctive understanding of the emotions of others. Yet, with time and repeated exposure to toxic patterns, the empath begins to notice a subtle shift in perception. They start to recognize behaviors and dynamics that once seemed normal, but are, in truth, harmful and draining. This awakening is not instantaneous. It is a gradual illumination, where the empath becomes conscious of the recurring patterns of toxicity that have silently eroded their energy, their trust, and their sense of self. It is the point at which the empath no longer merely reacts to pain, but begins to discern the forces in their life that continually lead to it. This recognition of toxicity begins with awareness. Empaths by nature are highly attuned to the subtleties of human behavior, sensing the undercurrents of emotion that messing, people overlook. When they are repeatedly hurt, ignored, or manipulated, a pattern emerges. They notice that certain relationships consistently leave them exhausted, that some individuals demand more than they are willing to give, and that attempts to communicate boundaries are often met with resistance or disregard. These repeated experiences are not coincidences. They are signals. The empath starts to see clearly that not all hearts are aligned with their own, and that some people are simply incapable of respecting the depth of their emotional capacity. With this clarity comes a shift in decision-making. The empath begins to act with intention rather than reaction. No longer driven solely by the impulse to heal or help others, they start to assess the cost of engagement before giving themselves fully. They evaluate whether the energy they invest will be reciprocated, whether their compassion will be honored, and whether the relationship promotes mutual growth rather than one-sided dependency. This discernment is not born of cynicism, but of wisdom. It is the result of repeated experiences teaching them that giving without awareness can lead to depletion, resentment, and emotional harm. The process of recognizing patterns of toxicity also involves a heightened understanding of human motives and behavior. The empath begins to see beyond surface appearances, noticing when people's words, actions, or intentions are inconsistent with their proclaimed values. They can sense manipulative behaviors, passive-aggressive tendencies, and cycles of emotional abuse that were once invisible to them. This recognition is not meant to create fear or distrust of everyone, but to provide a map of where their energy is safe and where it may be compromised. They learn to read the signs, trust their instincts, and approach relationships with a balanced blend of openness and caution. Importantly, this awareness leads to the establishment of boundaries that protect the empath's well-being. Recognizing patterns of toxicity is the first step toward creating a framework where they can engage with others safely. They learn to limit interactions with those who repeatedly cause harm, to withdraw from relationships that no longer serve their growth, and to invest in connections that are nurturing, reciprocal, and aligned with their values. This is not rejection born of bitterness. It is discernment rooted in self-respect and self-preservation. As the empath becomes adept at identifying toxicity, they also begin to recognize their own role in these patterns. They reflect on why they were drawn to certain relationships, why they tolerated repeated disregard, and what lessons they must learn to break cycles of self-sacrifice and overgiving. This reflection is transformative, as it shifts the empath from a passive recipient of harm to an active participant in their own emotional sovereignty. They understand that while they cannot control others, they can control their response, their energy, and their boundaries. Ultimately, the recognition of toxic patterns is both a shield and a gateway. It protects the empath from further harm while guiding them toward relationships that are healthier, more balanced, and more fulfilling. It is a profound act of self-love, signaling a maturation of the soul and a deeper alignment with one's values and purpose. Through this process, the empath does not lose their capacity to love deeply. Instead, they learn to love wisely, to give consciously, and to protect the sacredness of their heart without fear or apology. The journey toward establishing emotional boundaries is one of the most profound transformations an empath can experience. For someone who has spent a lifetime feeling deeply and giving endlessly, the concept of boundaries may initially feel foreign, even uncomfortable. Empaths are wired to absorb the emotions of others, to offer support, and to give without expecting anything in return. Their compassion is boundless, their desire to help unwavering, and their capacity to forgive vast. Yet, in this unguarded openness lies a vulnerability that, when repeatedly tested, can leave them emotionally drained, disillusioned, and even resentful. Learning to create boundaries is not a betrayal of their nature. It is a sacred act of self-preservation, a necessary evolution for sustaining their emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. Boundaries serve as a protective framework for the empath's heart. They are not walls designed to shut others out, but filters that ensure only healthy, nourishing interactions reach their inner world. Establishing emotional boundaries requires the empath to clearly identify what is acceptable and what is harmful in their relationships. This may involve recognizing patterns where their kindness is exploited, where their feelings are dismissed, or where their presence is taken for granted. It is a conscious acknowledgement that their time, energy, and emotional resources are precious and must be managed with intention rather than left at the mercy of others' demands. The process of setting boundaries begins with self-awareness. Empaths must first understand their own limits, desires, and needs. They reflect on past experiences, noting where they have been drained or taken advantage of. This reflection is not an exercise in blame, but in clarity. By acknowledging their vulnerabilities and identifying recurring patterns of harm, empaths gain the insight necessary to protect themselves in future interactions. They begin to understand that their empathy is a gift, but one that must be wielded with discernment. Protecting their emotional space becomes an act of honoring their gift rather than diminishing it. Boundaries are also about communication. It is one thing to recognize one's limits internally. It is another to express them clearly to others. Empaths who have spent years prioritizing others' needs may struggle with asserting themselves, fearing conflict, rejection, or the loss of connection. Yet, learning to communicate boundaries is an essential skill in preserving their energy and maintaining healthy relationships. It involves being honest about what they can and cannot tolerate, expressing their needs respectfully, and being consistent in upholding those limits. Over time, this clarity fosters mutual respect and encourages others to engage with them authentically. Establishing boundaries requires courage and consistency. At first, there may be discomfort, guilt, or resistance, both internally and from those accustomed to the empath's endless giving. Loved ones, friends, or colleagues may react negatively to the sudden assertion of limits. However, the empath begins to recognize that these reactions are not reflections of selfishness, but signs that they are stepping into their power. They understand that prioritizing their emotional health is not only necessary, but an act of higher love. By setting boundaries, they teach others how to treat them and cultivate relationships built on respect rather than dependency or exploitation. Emotional boundaries also enable empaths to sustain their capacity for deep connection. Without boundaries, they risk being overwhelmed by the weight of others' emotions, leaving little space for their own growth, healing, and joy. With boundaries, they create a safe space where empathy can flourish without burnout. They learn to discern when to engage deeply, when to offer support, and when to step back for their own well-being. In this way, boundaries are not barriers to connection, but enablers of more meaningful, balanced, and sustainable relationships. Ultimately, the establishment of emotional boundaries is a spiritual and transformative practice. It reflects the empath's evolution from someone who gives indiscriminately to someone who gives consciously. It signals the awakening of wisdom, self-respect, and divine understanding. By honoring their own limits, empaths preserve their energy, nurture their inner light, and create the foundation for authentic, reciprocal, and nurturing connections. Boundaries are not a denial of compassion. They are a declaration that the heart is sacred, the soul is valuable, and love is most powerful when it is given wisely and with integrity. The journey of an empath who has been hurt repeatedly inevitably leads to a place of reflection, where self-awareness becomes both a mirror and a guide. This process of self-reflection is essential because it allows the empath to confront not only the pain inflicted by others, but also the patterns and choices that have contributed to their suffering. Through deep introspection, they begin to understand the dynamics of their relationships, the nature of their giving, and the areas where their own heart has been vulnerable to exploitation. It is a process that is rarely easy, for it requires honesty, courage, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths about both themselves and those they have trusted. Self-reflection allows the empath to see beyond the surface of interactions, to observe the recurring situations where they have given too much or received too little. They begin to recognize the signs of emotional depletion, the constant feeling of being drained, the weight of unreciprocated care, and the moments when their love has been met with indifference or manipulation. By examining these experiences, the empath gains clarity about the patterns that have left them vulnerable. They start to understand that their repeated hurt is not a reflection of weakness, but a natural consequence of giving without boundaries, of placing others' needs above their own without discernment. This period of introspection also brings insight into the nature of human behavior. The empath begins to discern which individuals consistently bring nourishment to their life and which ones create chaos or drain their energy. They learn to observe intentions, rather than simply accepting appearances, and to trust their intuition when it signals danger or imbalance. This heightened awareness is a crucial step in their evolution because it allows them to navigate relationships with greater wisdom and emotional intelligence. They start to differentiate between those who are capable of reciprocal care and those who are not, and in doing so, they reclaim the power to protect their own heart. Inner healing becomes intertwined with this reflection. The empath realizes that hurt is inevitable in a world where not everyone shares the same capacity for sensitivity and understanding, but suffering need not define them. They explore the emotions left behind by betrayal, rejection, and neglect, allowing themselves to feel deeply while also seeking ways to release the lingering pain. This healing is not a quick process. It is gradual, requiring patience, forgiveness, and a commitment to self-compassion. By engaging with their own emotional wounds, the empath strengthens their resilience and cultivates a sense of inner peace that no external circumstance can easily disturb. Through this reflective process, the empath also begins to redefine their sense of self and their approach to love. They recognize that their value is not determined by how much they give to others, nor is their worth diminished by the actions of those who have hurt them. Instead, they understand that their true power lies in their ability to care consciously, to love wisely, and to maintain integrity while navigating a world that may not always honor their sensitivity. This realization empowers them to make conscious choices about whom to engage with, how deeply to invest, and when to step back for the sake of their well-being. Self-reflection transforms the empath from a passive participant in their own suffering into an active guardian of their emotional and spiritual health. It teaches them that their heart is sacred, that their energy is precious, and that protection is not a betrayal of love, but an essential aspect of it. Through introspection, they learn to forgive without condoning harm, to release attachments without resentment, and to honor their boundaries without guilt. Ultimately, the act of reflecting and healing elevates the empath to a higher plane of emotional intelligence and spiritual maturity. It allows them to navigate relationships from a place of strength rather than dependency, wisdom rather than naivety, and discernment rather than blind giving. By embracing self-reflection and inner healing, the empath transforms their repeated hurt into a source of clarity, empowerment, and divine insight, ensuring that their future interactions are guided by conscious choice rather than unconscious patterns. As the empath moves through the journey of repeated hurt, introspection, and boundary setting, they eventually reach a stage where their understanding of love and connection transforms completely. This is a pivotal moment. They realize that the way they once approached relationships through endless giving, unconditional surrender, and unguarded vulnerability, though beautiful, was not always sustainable. The repeated pattern of being hurt taught them that true connection cannot thrive when it comes at the expense of their own well-being. In this stage, the empath begins to redefine love, not as a limitless sacrifice for others, but as a balanced, conscious exchange that honors both hearts. Redefining love starts with understanding that their emotional energy is sacred. The empath begins to recognize that love is not measured by how much they give, nor validated by the gratitude or attention of others. True love, they discover, is rooted in alignment and reciprocity, not obligation or expectation. This awareness does not diminish their capacity to feel or care. Rather, it elevates it. They understand that authentic love flows freely, but it is strongest when it is given intentionally, with discernment, and without compromising one's own emotional health. This evolution in perspective also reshapes their approach to connection. Empaths begin to seek relationships that nourish rather than deplete, partnerships where emotional exchange is mutual, and interactions that feel safe, respectful, and uplifting. They start to observe the energy dynamics around them more keenly, sensing when engagement will be enriching and when it will be draining. In doing so, they cultivate connections that are grounded in trust, respect, and integrity, rather than allowing themselves to be pulled repeatedly into patterns of imbalance and emotional exhaustion. Part of this redefinition involves a deeper understanding of boundaries within love. The empath learns that setting limits is not a rejection of love, but an affirmation of it. By clearly defining what is acceptable and what is harmful, they create space for healthier, more authentic interactions. They no longer compromise their emotional safety in the name of love. Instead, they allow love to exist in its most powerful and sustainable form, one that nurtures rather than diminishes. Boundaries become a tool for maintaining equilibrium, ensuring that their capacity to care remains intact, while also honoring their own needs and values. The empath also begins to recognize the importance of self-love in the context of relational dynamics. They understand that they cannot pour from an empty cup, and that their ability to offer genuine care and connection depends on how well they honor themselves first. Self-love is not narcissism. It is the foundation upon which all meaningful relationships are built. By prioritizing their own emotional health, the empath becomes more present, more balanced, and more capable of engaging in connections that are truly reciprocal. This stage is transformative because it shifts the empath from a reactive state to a conscious one. They no longer act solely out of compassion or the desire to help others, but from a place of wisdom and deliberate choice. They learn to love without attachment to outcomes, to care without sacrificing themselves, and to give without expectation of repayment. The relationships they cultivate are not driven by necessity or fear, but by mutual respect, shared values, and authentic emotional resonance. Ultimately, redefining love and connection allows the empath to step into their power fully. They understand that love is not about martyrdom or endless giving. It is about conscious engagement, emotional integrity, and mutual growth. Through this evolution, the empath experiences deeper, more meaningful relationships and discovers that true connection is not measured by quantity of sacrifice, but by the quality of emotional harmony, understanding, and balance. They learn that the heart, when protected and respected, has the capacity to love more profoundly than ever before, not blindly, but wisely, and with a clarity that transforms both themselves and those they choose to connect with. The transformation of an empath into someone who embodies a more avoidant approach is often misunderstood, even feared. By those who witness it, to the untrained eye, it may appear as though the empath has hardened, withdrawn, or turned away from the world. But in truth, this shift represents one of the most profound forms of empowerment an empath can achieve. It is the culmination of years of deep feeling, repeated hurt, conscious reflection, and deliberate boundary setting. What may seem like avoidance is not an abandonment of compassion or love, but a deliberate choice to honor one's own heart, preserve emotional integrity, and engage with the world from a place of wisdom and strength. This transformation begins with awareness. The empath recognizes the recurring patterns that have caused pain and depletion and understands that continuing to give blindly is unsustainable. They see the energy dynamics around them with clarity, identifying relationships that are toxic, one-sided, or emotionally draining. This awareness is not born of cynicism, but of hard-earned discernment. It allows the empath to step back before being consumed again, to preserve their emotional resources, and to avoid repeating the cycles that have caused suffering in the past. In this sense, avoidance becomes a form of empowerment, a conscious strategy to protect their sacred energy. Becoming avoidant also represents a deeper alignment with self-respect and self-preservation. Empaths have spent much of their lives giving endlessly, often at the expense of their own well-being. In learning to prioritize themselves, they reclaim the power that was once diluted by overgiving. They no longer feel compelled to fix or save those who refuse to meet them halfway. Instead, they focus on relationships and experiences that honor their energy and allow them to thrive. This is not rejection, it is discernment. A recognition that their heart is too valuable to expend on patterns that no longer serve their growth. The shift to avoidant behavior also fosters emotional resilience. By stepping back from harmful dynamics, the empath learns to withstand emotional turbulence without being overwhelmed. They cultivate a capacity for detachment, not indifference, but a measured response to the emotional currents around them. This detachment allows them to maintain clarity and stability, enabling deeper reflection, wiser choices, and a stronger sense of inner peace. They become able to navigate relationships and life's challenges without being pulled into unnecessary conflict, drama, or emotional exhaustion. Importantly, this transformation does not diminish the empath's capacity for love and connection. Rather, it elevates it to a higher, more sustainable level. The empath who has become selectively avoidant loves from a place of wisdom and alignment. They are able to give fully, but only where it is safe, mutual, and nourishing. They understand that unconditional love does not require endless sacrifice or exposure to harm, and that protecting oneself is an essential component of loving wisely. Through this lens, avoidance is not a withdrawal from life, but an awakening to the principle that true love honors both self and other. This stage also represents profound spiritual and emotional maturity. The empath recognizes that their sensitivity is a gift, not a weakness, and that setting boundaries and stepping back is a form of divine stewardship over their energy. They no longer allow fear, guilt, or obligation to dictate their interactions. Instead, they act from intentionality, wisdom, and alignment with their higher purpose. Every choice, every step back is a testament to their growth and resilience. Ultimately, the transformation into an avoidant stance is a declaration of strength, discernment, and spiritual sovereignty. It is the embodiment of empowerment born from suffering, of W is Dom born from repeated hurt, and of freedom born from self-honoring. The empath has not lost their heart. They have refined it, protected it, and now operate from a place where love, compassion, and connection are offered consciously, sustainably, and powerfully. This transformation is not a retreat, but a rise, a conscious stepping into the power of their own emotional and spiritual authority, ensuring that every future connection nurtures rather than diminishes their soul. Thank you for trusting me with your journey and allowing these words to resonate with your heart. Wishing you strength, clarity, and peace as you step forward. Goodbye and keep shining your light.